Epilogue narrated by George in his 16th year. The cold had helped clear my mind, not enough to improve my humour, but enough at least to quiet the agitation that had followed me since arriving home from school 3 days earlier. Blackmere usually settled something in me the moment I returned to it. The order of the house, the routines, the certainty of knowing where everything belonged and who belonged within it restored me faster than rest itself. After months spent at school, surrounded endlessly by noise and expectation, home was the one place where I might breathe again. But Christmas had transformed the house into something unrecognizable. The annual ball brought half the county into Blackmere every year, along with enough noise and strangers to make the place feel less like my home and more like a hotel. Everywhere I turned, another guest was waiting to stop me, daughters pushed towards me by ambitious mothers, fathers attempting conversation about politics or university, and boys near enough my age behaving as though drunkenness and volume were personalities worth possessing. By the second evening of it, I'd found myself driven outdoors for the relief of silence. I crossed back towards the front entrance, and the footman opened the door as I reached it. My lord. I'd been too irritated when I left to bother putting my coat on in the first place, so I handed it to him as he'd given it to me. Thank you. None of those minor inconveniences, however, compared to Sophie. By that point in the evening, I'd walked more of the Blackmere grounds alone in the cold than I thought I had in the entirety of my life, trying to regain command of myself after every encounter with her. I couldn't decide whether she understood what she was doing to me, or whether I only suffered from the misfortune of knowing her too well. Either way, she appeared determined to test the limits of my patience from the moment the dancing began, and when I paused just beyond the ballroom doorway, I found her once again in the arms of that damn Fairchild boy. The idiot had one hand against her waist while Sophie laughed at him, and I cannot properly explain the rage I felt, not merely because he was touching her, but because she allowed it. Ordinarily, holidays at Blackmere meant the Wentworths became impossible to separate from us. Our families had moved between one another's houses for so many years now that I didn't think of Sophie and her brothers as guests at all. And despite everything school had turned into these last years, some selfish part of me had looked forward to returning to that version of things again. I thought I might come home and find Sophie as I'd left her when summer ended. Instead, Sophie Wentworth had become a woman while my back was turned, and every young man in Sussex got to see it before I did, which I found I disliked immensely. The music ended a moment later, and as the dancers separated, Sophie glanced towards me. I disliked at once how beautiful she was tonight. Not because I took no pleasure in it myself, but because every other man enjoyed it as well. Someone had seen fit to pin her hair up from her face and put colour on her mouth, and I found both decisions irritating. Her gown was blue, my particular shade of blue, which felt pointed enough to unsettle me further. And standing beneath the lights with her eyes fixed on me through all of it, I understood that Sophie no longer inspired in me anything that might be called brotherly at all. Every instinct in me demanded I cross the ballroom, take her into my arms, and remove her from every other man there before one of them forgot himself enough to touch her again. Instead, I stood frozen like a fool while my thoughts abandoned me. I wanted to go to her. I wanted it enough that I found myself half prepared to do it before considering how such behavior might appear to the rest of the room. But with everyone watching, I couldn't decide whether crossing the ballroom towards Sophie would make me seem romantic or unhinged. I was still standing there arguing with myself when the same boy reached her again and took her hand before I moved at all. She kept her attention fixed on me as he drew her back into the dance. But then she rolled her eyes and shook her head as though I'd disappointed her beyond reason as he turned her away from me. My father came to stand beside me then with a whiskey glass in hand. For a moment, he said nothing at all until he motioned with the glass towards Sophie. She does look quite lovely tonight, does she not? I gave my father a look suggesting he must already be well into the whiskey if he had only just now noticed it himself. As always, of course, I said. Cyril appeared at my other side a moment later with a glass of liquor of his own, rubbing at his chin as he lifted it at Sophie. I believe that is the third dance that boy has taken with her tonight. Fourth, actually, my father corrected before taking another sip. I watched the Fairchild boy catch Sophie lightly by the chin as though he possessed some right to touch her so freely, and I wanted to break his hand for it. He is so far beneath her, he ought to look up to speak to her, I said. Yes, Cyril said. Most boys are. He took a drink before glancing towards me again. She was rather excited to dance with you tonight, actually. I'd nearly crossed the room to her half a dozen times already that evening before thinking better of it each time. And now I found myself regretting that I had not asked her the moment she arrived. If I had, no other boy would have dared approach her afterward. She was. He took another drink before loosening his tie slightly at the collar. But that Fairchild chap has let no one else near her all evening, he said. A shame, really. I expect she will be quite disappointed. Well, we simply cannot have that, Father said as he motioned towards the ballroom floor. George, as the future Earl, I dare say it is your duty to ensure she enjoys herself fully. You must rescue her this instant. If Sophie had truly spent the evening waiting for me while I stood against the wall watching other boys hold her instead, then I had handled the matter poorly indeed. And my father was right. Sophie had come to Blackmere expecting to dance with me. If that had not yet happened, the fault rested entirely with me. The music began to slow a moment later as the dance neared its end, and this time I found I had no difficulty moving at all. George, I glanced back over my shoulder and found my father with one hand raised towards his mouth as though he meant to conceal the conversation, despite making no effort to do so. Just remember there is mistletoe above nearly every doorway tonight, he said, making Cyril choke on his drink. I looked back at both of them as though they had lost their minds, then turned my attention towards Sophie again before either man could continue embarrassing himself further. I reached her just as the music came to its end, bowing my head to her as the other boy fell back. I believe this dance belongs to me, Miss Wentworth. She only stared at me, an audible scoff leaving her. But by then, I had already taken her hand into mine and brought her into position as the orchestra began the next song. You are behaving strangely tonight, George, she said as I guided her into the waltz. You have not spoken to me at all. I glanced past her shoulder and saw Fairchild still lingering at the edge of the ballroom as though waiting for the opportunity to put his hands on her again the moment this dance ended, and what little good sense I possessed abandoned me. And I think it is strange, I said before thinking better of it, how you have spent the evening encouraging that idiot to make such a spectacle of you. She looked at me in complete disbelief, slowing her steps enough that the dance nearly stopped around us altogether. Apologized to me immediately. I attempted to guide her back into the movement of the dance before half the ballroom began staring outright. But Sophie planted her feet stubbornly against the floor and refused to move another inch. And what should I apologize for, my dear? She tossed my hands from her at once. You have not written me once all term. You have ignored me since I arrived, and now, the moment I begin enjoying myself despite it, you cut into my dance only to insult me. Several nearby couples had begun looking towards us, but Sophie appeared beyond caring by that point. What is wrong with you? She demanded as she backed away from me. This is not the George I know at all. The worst part of it was that she was not wrong. Something between us had changed over these last few years, and I found I had no proper understanding of how to manage it. So I had done nothing. I had not written. I had avoided her and convinced myself things would return to normal the moment I saw her again, yet my heart burned even more. But instead of telling her so, I had only hurt her. And as Sophie disappeared through the ballroom doors, looking genuinely upset because of me, I found I couldn't bear the thought of allowing it to remain that way. So I went after her. I followed the sound of her feet stomping to the western corridor, moving quickly enough to suggest she meant not to be followed at all. Sophie, wait. Do bugger off, Lord Rowen, she yelled back at me, the words striking me differently when they came from Sophie. because perhaps for the first time all evening I wondered whether I had behaved very lordly at all. I caught up to her near the morning room entrance and took hold of her elbow before she could escape me. "I will not." She attempted to pull away again, still quite cross with me. "You do not get to spend the entire evening behaving like a lunatic and then tell me I am the one who is making a spectacle," she said as I guided her through the nearest doorway before anyone lingering in the corridor might decide to involve themselves in matters that did not concern them. She was right about all of it, of course. If not for my behavior these last months, Sophie would have been at my side tonight exactly as she always had been, instead of dancing with other men and looking at me as though she didn't recognize me anymore. And the truth of it was plain enough now that I found myself forced to look at it directly. Ignoring what I felt towards Sophie had not improved the matter in the slightest. It had only made us both miserable instead. Standing there with her waiting for some explanation I couldn't give, I realized I possessed no sensible excuse for any of it. Sophie turned her eyes away from me, and I caught sight of the tears gathering, her lips trembling despite how hard she tried to hide it from me. I looked upwards as though the proper words might somehow appear if I searched hard enough for them, but instead I found mistletoe hanging above us, and it occurred to me that there was perhaps only one thing left capable of putting any of this right. So I caught her face between my hands and kissed her. For one terrible moment, I was certain I had made a complete disaster of everything, not only between Sophie and me, but also between our families. The Wentworths had been woven through Blackmere for so long now that I couldn't remember one without the other. If I had mistaken all of this and Sophie pulled away from me now, I didn't know how any of us would return from it afterward. I ought to have thought the matter through far better before trapping her beneath Christmas mistletoe and kissing her like a madman. But then Sophie made a small sound against my mouth, and whatever restraint I possessed went with it. She kissed me back with enough feeling to strip every coherent thought from my head, and I understood all at once why men had behaved so recklessly when a woman was involved. Her arms came around my neck, pulling me closer against her, and I found I had little desire to stop it. After that, the matter of us was beyond recovery altogether. Sophie pulled back first, though not far enough to escape my arms. Instead, she kept hold of my coat and looked at me as though determined that I should face what I had put her through before she allowed me another kiss. "You never sent me a single letter," she said. "Not one." She swallowed visibly before continuing, her teary eyes fluttering away. "I met the postman at the box nearly every day, searching for your handwriting like some pathetic creature." I pushed the curl loose from her pins back from her face. "I wrote you many letters," I admitted and shrugged. "I simply could not bring myself to send them, because I saw no way forward through any of this if you did not love me back." I brought my forehead against hers then, my hands slipping back to her face. "To me, you are mine, Sophie. You always have been, and watching you in someone else's arms tonight was—" I sighed, unable to find a less humiliating description for it. Rather painful. The thought of returning to that ballroom after all of this and allowing another man near her again was an impossibility. I had already wasted half the evening failing to show the entire county what Sophie meant to me. I found I had little interest in repeating the mistake now that I understood she wanted me just as badly. "It was my error not to ask you to dance the moment the music started tonight," I said, "and I would very much like to dance with you now if you will still allow it." "I would like that very much," she said. The truth seemed almost absurdly obvious now that I'd finally allowed myself to look at it objectively. There had never been another choice for me besides Sophie Wentworth. She'd already been there through every important part of my life. No other girl in England knew me half so well as she did, nor understood the strange life waiting ahead of me at Blackmere and all that would someday be expected of me. I lifted her hand to my mouth and kissed it before leading her towards the party once more. Only this time, I didn't let go of her hand. Perhaps proper etiquette suggested I ought to. Unfortunately, I found I no longer cared what etiquette suggested where she was concerned, not in my own house. When we returned to the ballroom a few moments later, my father and Cyril still stood together near the fire with whiskey glasses in hand. My father noticed us first, stopping the conversation long enough to motion to us, drawing Cyril's attention towards us as well. Both of them smiled at once in the deeply irritating manner of fathers convinced they had been correct about something all along, lifting their glasses towards me together. The orchestra started the next dance, and I brought Sophie into position. Then, just as I reached for her hand again, Sophie suddenly bit back a smile and lifted her fingers to my mouth. "What are you doing?" I asked her. She laughed and scrubbed them against my lips. "You are wearing my lipstick all over you, my lord." Her hand settled back into mine once more, and I understood with complete certainty that there would never again be another girl I wished to dance with besides my Sophie, and as it happened, there never was.